It's a simple phrase. Voting is how we make the world better. With every election, at every level of our society, it becomes more important as we work to strengthen democracy and address society's challenges. Let's explore voting, climate, legislation, and consequences of our decisions. The consequences of an ill-informed or well-informed vote are enormous. This talk focuses on the causes of global warming and climate change, especially oil and gas, and facts about that sector of our society that we use to make electricity, heat our homes, and drive our cars. We know we are in a climate emergency. In an emergency, we hopefully act swiftly using facts and ensuring social and climate justice. Are we doing that? Not so much. As we watch, sometimes in horror, at the building impacts from climate change, should we not act on this emergency footing? We watch wildfires, the burning of communities, increases in hurricane intensity and extreme weather, impacts from drought to our food security, water availability and quality, melting of ice caps and glaciers, and sea level rise, flooding at greater intensities and frequencies, costing communities millions of dollars and loss of quality of life. The climate is changing, so many reports document this fact. We see direct threats to our community health and its very life. We are out of balance, too much waste and flaunting of abundance. We experience roller coaster economies and inequalities related to our mishandling of our food production, management of our natural resources, and energy generation and use. And we are witnessing environmental collapse and mass extinction on a global scale. This is a time of peril for our planet as we know it. These imbalances and losses affect our lives. And we know the cause. It is the burning of fossil fuels, a practice that has given civilization many good things, but now the cost has a reckoning. The price tag is our planet's health and our civilization's viability. We know the solution. A big part of it is guiding our behaviors through foundational laws. In this context, foundational climate laws directly address the source of the problem, the factors causing climate change. We must rapidly and greatly reduce the use of our fossil fuels in all sectors of our society. It is time in this climate emergency to transform our society. We must address this climate emergency and do so through well-informed voting as well as personal and societal actions. As we explore a path forward, let it be known that clean energy is indeed cheaper than dirty energy. Here is an interesting observation from the Yale program on climate change communication. They asked people what they thought about natural gas, and then they asked them what they thought about methane. Look at this word association comparison of the two questions. The perception that natural gas is clean is high on the list, but for methane, not so much. This means the public doesn't really understand what natural gas is, nor where we get our methane, whereas in fact the two are the same. The Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. Geological Survey, and many private sector groups, such as the Environmental Defense Fund and others, have shown that natural gas, which is mostly methane and more properly called Frack-Gas, as we will soon see, leaks from the infrastructure at all stages of its drilling, recovery, storage, transportation, and pipeline use, transfers and at power plants, and even in gas lines to your home. It leaks from your gas stove and furnace. Methane is 30 times more potent over 100 years as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. It is a human health hazard, and if you use it, degrades the indoor air quality of your home, impacting the health of you and your family. Take a look at this Ohio Highway Patrol video of a massive methane leak from a fracked well blowout. This occurred in February 2018 and took 20 days to control. it spewed 60,000 tons of methane into the atmosphere. That's equivalent to the emissions from 2.7 million cars. The Environmental Defense Fund and others have found that methane leaks nationwide are 60% higher than originally estimated by the EPA. As I've noted, methane leaks from every stage of its recovery, transportation, storage, pipelines, and use. In gas lines to your home, from gas stoves, from storage throughout your city. This is measured. This is a fact. Take a look at periodic gas line leaks in these cities. All these orange and red dots indicate gas leaks in this 2014 EDF survey across the country. Here you can see gas leaks in Pittsburgh and in Syracuse, Pasadena, Burlington, Dallas, all through the greater metro area, and Chicago throughout neighborhoods, and in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and Jacksonville, Florida, and Birmingham, Alabama. The Porter Ranch leak in Aliso Canyon oil field north of Los Angeles, California, was the largest recorded gas leak in the U.S. at the time. Over a 5-month period in 2015 to 2016, 97,000 tons of methane and 7,300 tons of ethane leaked from a metal pipe in an injection well, as shown in this inset infrared video. The gas is the reddish-purplish haze wafting over communities. This volume is equal to the emissions from 4.5 million cars. 2,200 families in the area were relocated, and people, including 50 children, suffered from headaches, nausea, skin rashes, and severe nosebleeds, and we have no idea about the long-term health consequences. There are leaks throughout New York City. Note the Staten Island map. Boston has widespread gas line leaks, as highlighted in this 2020 histogram representation. All across Massachusetts and Rhode Island, from Boston to the east, north, and south to Providence, are gas line leaks. From Springfield to Agawam across the river, New Bedford to Newton and to Salem, East Hampton to Longmeadow. And there are the towns of Lawrence, Andover, and North Andover, north of Boston, infamous for a series of devastating gas leaks and explosions in Merrimack Valley. Gas explosions on September 13, 2018, killed 1 man, triggered 80 fires, and required 8,000 people to evacuate. We see leaks in gas lines in our nation's capital, the histogram underlining the fact that they are everywhere. And in Connecticut, this map shows the city of Danbury. Again, gas leaks are common. The same is true in New London, Connecticut, and in our state capital, the city of Hartford. Gas line leaks are common. They are dangerous to your health, dangerous to the environment, and drive climate change. Take a look at this map story animated record of oil and gas pipeline spills nationwide from 1986 to 2016. Oil and gas pipeline failures are common. They are a health and environmental hazard and cost communities millions of dollars, and they contribute to climate change intensity. So, what is natural gas, really? Natural gas is mostly methane. Methane, of course, is a potent greenhouse gas, 25 to 30 times more potent than carbon dioxide and a key driver of climate change, as I've said. Natural gas also contains ethane, which is mainly used to make plastics. And there is propane, used every day in homes, on farms, and by industry. Natural gas also contains butane, a gas used as a refrigerant, an aerosol propellant, and in drug manufacture. The more of these gases we use, the more natural gas must be pumped from the earth. Let's look at propane. It is a small percentage of gas as a whole, so the more we use, the more natural gas is needed, and the more methane is put into our biosphere. Where does all this so-called natural gas come from? Over 60% of gas is produced using fracking, a drilling and recovering method in the oil patch that uses a cocktail of chemicals, water, and sand. to fracture and remove gas from tight rocks, such as shale, sandstone, and limestone. This practice is very effective at removing hard-to-recover gas, but comes at an environmental, water quality, and human health cost. So natural gas is now more properly termed frack-gas, and if you use natural gas, aka frack-gas, then you are supporting fracking and all its impacts upon us. And because you need to know this, frack oil and gas and conventional oil and gas are produced from hundreds of oil fields and dozens of shale basins across North America. Every sector of our society is touched by the production, transport, and use of these petroleum products across our country. The web of pipelines and refineries looks like a vascular diagram pumping energy to every finger and toe of America. Here in Connecticut, no less than 14 large power plants and the Millstone nuclear power plant are the basis of our existing energy system, all connected with pipelines and delivery systems, some degree of which leak frack gas. You need to know this because this knowledge informs you as to the magnitude of the task at hand and the need for foundational legislation. That legislation must address the source of the problem, fossil fuels, so that we can transform our carbon economy of oil and gas and coal towards a clean energy, sustainable-oriented economy. Only by doing this can we effectively combat climate change, offsetting its increasingly devastating impacts, and to save lives. Connecticut has made some progress in the past towards seriously addressing climate change and its impacts, but progress stalled as political divisions intensified. The General Assembly, Connecticut's State House and Senate, stepped up in 2022 and addressed some long-standing issues. In the past 22 years, Connecticut has seen a few leading pieces of legislation: the 2001 Climate Change Action Plan and the 2004 Climate Change Act, which codified greenhouse gas reduction levels for the first time. In 2008, the Global Warming Solutions Act, which is a foundational piece of legislation, now law, reaffirmed reduction of greenhouse gases 10% below 1990 levels by 2020, a target we have missed, but reduced the 2050 goal down from 85% to 80% below 2001 levels. The Green Bank Act in 2016 established an equitable methodology to help fund clean energy for Connecticut residents. The 2018 Climate Change Planning and Resilience Act reset the greenhouse gas reduction goals. And now, SB 10 in 2022, a 100% zero-carbon electricity grid by 2040 requirement. And SB 4, also passed in 2022, the Clean Air Act, looks to reduce vehicle emissions. These are key bills, important bills. But by now we have plenty of studies, reports, working groups, committees, summits, declarations, especially through the Governor's Council on Climate Change, the GC3. So, how are we doing? Where do we stand with Connecticut's emissions reductions goals? By 2030, we, by law, must reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 45% overall. By 2030 and 2035, significant reductions in vehicle emissions must occur, and a requirement for electric vehicles, especially in transit and school buses. By 2040, we must achieve a zero-carbon electricity sector. Those are the power lines coming to your home, businesses, schools, and stores. By 2050, by law, we must reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 80% statewide. These goals are not wholly achievable with current policies and laws, but these goals are law and critical steps forward. And remember, we are in a climate emergency. Take a look at this graphic. On the bottom of the graph are the years out to 2050, when we are supposed to have an 80% reduction in emissions statewide. On the left are the millions of metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent gases, including methane, we are currently pumping into the air from exhaust, smokestacks, and gasline leaks, and other sources. In the middle of the graph, you can see the 2020 target, the red dot, and the measured 2018 emissions, the orange dot. We've missed the 2020 target, in essence violating state law according to the 2008 Global Warming Solutions Act. No way are we going to meet our 2030 target at the rate we're going. In 2050, we have to do more. It's like me trying to lose weight by eating ice cream every night. Connecticut keeps burning more and more oil and Frack-Gas, and with a diet like that, we'll never lose our greenhouse gas emissions weight. Connecticut's energy mix consists of two dominant sources, Frack-Gas and the Millstone nuclear power plant. The nuclear power plant is on schedule to close in less than 10 years, unless it's extended again. What will replace that? Connecticut's offshore wind will fill some of that need, but not enough, and it's not yet built. As solar installation companies and clean energy groups such as PACE have so clearly stated, we need solar panels on every roof, over every parking lot, and backed up with battery storage for non-sunny times. But with our power providers' goals of expanding natural gas and the production trends of frack gas from shale basins, as shown here, well, we have a heavy lift to wean us off of fossil fuels and significantly ramp up our solar, wind, and battery storage for a clean energy economy. This is necessary for us to meet our state-required greenhouse gas emissions goals. I'm going to show you several graphs. They might look confusing, but they illustrate a path forward and give us a glimpse of the needed foundational legislation and a well-informed voting public. These graphs are the result of climate models from En-ROADS and MIT, working groups to identify which paths forward best lead us to a cleaner energy economy and the opportunity to seriously slow the ravages of climate change. All the data in fine print on the lower half of the illustration represents our energy sources, fossil fuels or clean energy, whether or not we have a carbon tax, transportation and building energy systems, whether electric or gas, population, and economic growth. On the right, how we treat our forests, and how we use technology to remove carbon from the atmosphere. All of these components are factors you can fiddle with in this free, online En-ROADS global program from Climate Interactive. I want to show you 5 global graphs, and the main thing to notice is the temperature result in the upper right in degrees centigrade in blue and degrees Fahrenheit in red. The colorful graph in the upper left will show you how much renewable energy in green and frack gas in blue are in the mix. This first graph is our status quo. If we just keep doing what we're doing now, the Earth will increase its global temperature to 3.6 degrees centigrade by the end of the century, 2100. If we don't act more aggressively to curb climate change by rapidly reducing the use of fossil fuels, then our society will be increasingly impacted. People's quality of life will drop, deaths will increase, and our environment will continue to falter. It gets pretty bad, so the status quo is not the answer. Let's look at some actions in the second graph. This is if we increase the use of fossil fuels, such as the current industry plan to increase the use of frack gas. This also shows the overall lowering of the percent of renewables because of the statistical increase in frack gas. If we do this, the Earth will increase its global temperature above normal by 4 degrees centigrade by the end of the century, 2100. This is not a good way to go, so increasing the use of fossil fuels is not the answer. In the third graph, I've dialed in more renewables, but I'm keeping frack gas, natural gas, at levels we're using now. I've also added greater electrification of transportation and buildings. This is the strategy in Connecticut at this time. As you can see, this only moves the temperature needle a little bit. In this scenario, the Earth will increase its global temperature to 3 degrees centigrade by the end of the century, 2100. So this is only part of the answer, a part of the answer we need to actually do. In the fourth graph, I've kept it like the last one, but I've added a carbon tax. This moves the needle the most. The Earth will increase its global temperature by 2.4 degrees in this scenario, again instead of 3.6 or 4.0 degrees by the end of the century. This is the best result so far, adding a carbon tax. In this fifth and last case, I've dropped all the fossil fuels, I've upped the carbon tax, I've focused on installation of all renewables, electrifying buildings and transportation, replanting forests and sequestering carbon. This is throwing the global book at climate change. This solution is the most extreme and holds the global temperature to an increase of just 1.3 degrees centigrade, the lowest temperature increase we could achieve at this point in history. This solution is the total transformation of society from a carbon economy to a clean, energy, and sustainable-oriented economy. The problem with this last case, though, is we are already at this temperature increase, and we haven't done much to really curb fossil fuels overall. We do have a carbon tax and dividend cashback bill sitting in committee in the U.S. Congress, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. Our U.S. Representatives Johanna Hayes and Jim Himes are co-sponsors on this bill. But we need a little help from the Senate to pass it. And, according to the 2022 International Panel on Climate Change report, there is no let-up on increasing greenhouse gas emissions from burning fossil fuels. Remember when I said clean energy is cheaper than dirty energy? Well, sorry for more graphs, but take a look at these. According to the Energy Information Administration in a 2021 report, their comparison of the levelized cost of electricity, that is a measure of the average net present cost of electricity generation for a generating plant over its lifetime, indicates that utility-scale solar electricity, the lower yellow line, is cheaper than natural gas or Frack-Gas electrical generation, the upper, more expensive blue line, and will remain so by U.S. governmental projections out to 2050. Similarly, the EIA also projected a more favorable value-cost ratio for solar, the higher yellow line, over natural or Frack-Gas, the lower blue line. In essence, solar electrical generation yields a greater power plant revenue to its costs than natural gas or Frack-Gas power plants, out to 2050 by U.S. government projections. It might not seem like a lot, but it's important because utilities and industries that say natural gas or Frack-Gas are cheaper than solar are incorrect and misleading. The data clearly shows you solar energy is the better economic choice, and it's cleaner, better for the environment and human health. We have solutions. It is clear getting off of fossil fuels is necessary to stop the ravages of climate change. It is also clear that a carbon tax to offset fossil fuel subsidies and foster innovation in clean energy, and with a cashback dividend to protect the financial well-being of lower and middle income households and those in underserved communities, is critical in seriously combating climate change. A carbon tax and cashback bill is a foundational piece of legislation. It is also clear that significantly cutting back on our new fossil fuel infrastructure is critically important, so a moratorium on fossil fuel infrastructure is a foundational piece of legislation. What do economists think about a carbon tax? Yale economist, IPCC participant, and Nobel recipient William Nordhaus said, "Carbon prices must be raised to transmit the social costs of greenhouse gas emissions to the everyday decisions of billions of firms and people." Nordhaus, along with 3,000 other economists, agree we need to legislate a carbon tax. And the data shows that we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions while still growing GDP, as shown on this graph. That's good news. So, how does a federal carbon tax and cashback, or a carbon fee and dividend, work? We know that our current carbon economy is based on fossil fuels providing the main source of energy for our electricity and heating and transportation. This energy is delivered to our homes, and the economic cycle is complete as we pay our electric and gas bills. And that money pays for the development of more oil, frack-gas, and coal. The unintended consequence of the carbon economy is climate change, but we now know that. We are in a climate emergency, so let's step it up. A federal carbon fee or tax would be levied on all fossil fuels at the source, not like a gas tax at the pump. This is at a proposed starting rate of $15 per metric ton carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. The proposal recommends an annual increase of $10 per metric ton. The fee would be assessed at the start of the supply chain, the mine for coal and tar sands, the well for oil and gas, and the port of first entry for any imported fuels. The collected fees are to be put into a U.S. Treasury Carbon Dividend Trust Fund. The fossil fuel industries and utilities' response will be to raise prices and energy rates, but the cashback or dividend part of the proposal covers this. A check is sent to every citizen on a monthly basis to offset rate increases that the oil and coal and natural gas companies and power generation companies would levy on the customers. The carbon tax rapidly balances the lopsided markets that favors fossil fuels because of federal subsidies, about 3 to 5 times greater than those received by renewable energy. This transforms our economy towards cheaper, clean energy systems, solar and wind and battery storage. This transformation addresses climate change, clean energy needs, a cleaner, healthy environment, environmental justice, and many other aspects of our society in a timely manner. We know the consequences if we don't do this. If we don't legislate a carbon tax on a federal and state levels, then our ability to seriously address climate change and fossil fuel pollution is catastrophically limited. Society will increasingly feel the negative impacts of climate change, and this will lead to increasing societal and economic instabilities. The people least responsible for climate change and the people least able to financially deal with its impacts are those people most impacted by climate change. This is a moral thing we must do. As was shown in the En-ROADS modeling and shown in this graph, if we stick to our current policies or only enact minor pieces of legislation, then there will be no stopping the ever-increasing ravages from climate change. But there are other related challenges that underline the need to curb our addiction to oil and gas, and that is the world of plastics. Plastics have polluted every nook and cranny of our global and local environments, throughout our oceans and terrestrial habitats, in our food chain, and impacting the health of all of us. Plastics are a product of oil and gas. Hydrocarbon chains to plastics of all types, and a lot of them are made from methane, the main component of frack-gas. Their use has been dominated by a single-use and throwaway culture that has created mountains of unmanageable wastes. If you have any doubt about this, check the shoreline. Plastics comprise most of the waste that floats in the ocean, washes up on the beaches, and is eaten by marine life, much to their detriment. And the majority of plastics are not recyclable, nor biodegradable or compostable. The labeling system, shown here, was designed by oil and gas and chemical companies and gives the impression of recyclability, but it is simply not the case. The more plastics we use, the more oil and gas are pumped from the ground, and the more methane enters our biosphere, and the more climate change intensifies, and the more the Earth warms. Managing our solid wastes is a big part of curbing our addiction to fossil fuels and to work towards a healthier, livable world. We are not recycling enough, and we are not composting organic and biodegradable materials enough. This is an area we must attend to in this climate emergency. One last point on energy: hydrogen. Hydrogen has been targeted as a fuel for cars and power plants, and the oil and gas industry is much in favor of this. This is because just about all of our produced hydrogen is made from frack-gas or coal gas. This hydrogen, called gray or blue hydrogen, is not a clean source of energy because so much frack gas is used in making it. Only hydrogen concentrated through the use of electrolysis of water using renewable clean energy results in a clean life cycle hydrogen fuel. This is called green hydrogen. Remember this. This is the only form of hydrogen manufacture that does not contribute to the acceleration of climate change and all of its deleterious impacts. In the last few minutes, and with this background on energy and climate, let's return to our foundational legislation discussion. Now that we know the seriousness of climate change impacts and the irreversible changes outlined by the International Panel on Climate Change 2022 findings, now that we know the facts about natural gas, aka Frack-Gas, aka methane, now that we know the main policies that will arrest climate change, let's look at critical foundational pieces of proposed legislation and some of those that have passed. We can think of this as follows. We need foundational legislation that directly addresses and solves the main problem that fossil fuels are driving climate change. These laws, including the 2008 Global Warming Solutions Act, Green Bank legislation, and the just-passed Clean Air Act and Climate Mitigation Act, shown in highlighted bright yellow, are in this category. Also shown here in lighter yellow are laws that must be passed if we are to continue to seriously deal with climate change, energy, community issues, economy, and the environment. A carbon tax with cashback and a moratorium on fossil fuels are two of the biggest that we need to now tackle. We can identify non-foundational legislation that supports the overarching foundational laws. There is a growing body of such laws, but without the foundational laws, these will not significantly deal with the challenges and impacts at hand. But they have local and state importance and can address inequities in our society fairly quickly. And we recognize those false leads in legislation that have within their proposals or statutes a call for more frack gas and fossil fuel investments, or actions that delay foundational or supportive legislation rather than directly addressing the problem. We have to be careful of these false leads as they delay actions to no benefit of this and future generations. There is broad support in Connecticut, New England, and across America for these foundational and supportive efforts. This is especially true amongst young people whose very livelihood and future are at stake as we deal with climate change impacts and all the related challenges to all aspects of our society. A well-informed vote will get us there and will preserve democracy. I sincerely want to thank all of the public servants and elected officials who work so hard, tirelessly, and honestly with open minds and bipartisanship to help us move forward on these issues. I also want to thank all of the not-for-profit groups, the volunteer groups, and the citizens across the state and, in fact, the country who stand up and help get this done. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.